group Flowers Start World, you'll know that I've been to a vintage Christmas market at Penshurst, which is a tiny village. You might know the historic house and gardens, Penshurst Place. It's just outside Tunbridge Wells on the Kent-Sussex border. And I've posted quite a few pictures in my Facebook group, so you might want to have a look and see some more exciting details of what I got up to. So it's not a thrift haul. These are, well, they're not all brand new items. There are some vintage items in there, but the prices weren't charity shop prices. But I will say I went with my friends Jan and Lisa, and we had one of the best days out that we've had for a very long time. First up, I bought these absolutely gorgeous Christmas cards. 5 Christmas cards and envelopes with a little girl, and I loved the fact she was, looked so vintage. And these came from Emily, who is the proprietor of Box Paper Scissors. And if you put box.paper.scissors into Instagram, you'll find her. And I saw her from across the road. I suddenly heard her saying, "Oh, I don't do any other markets in Faversham apart from the Open Gardens Market." And I turned around and thought, that's my girl, because my job on the Faversham Open Gardens Volunteers Committee is to find market stall holders for our Faversham Open Gardens and Themed Garden Market, which takes place on the last Sunday in June. So it was lovely to catch up with Emily and to support her business. She has gorgeous things, wrapping paper cards, lovely paper crafting scissors, really good quality Japanese make, and lots of wrapping paper, trimmings, trims, you name it, in the stationery department linked to gift giving. She has got everything you would possibly need. Now, before we actually went into the village hall, and I would say village hall, it's not the kind of village hall you're thinking of. Remember I said that Penshurst was an historic village. The village hall was gorgeous. It was built in stone. It looked a little bit like a church inside. It had a raised area with a stage. And then when you were standing on the stage looking backwards, it had a raised area where presumably there's extra seats if they're having performances. And I must admit, when we paid our £2.50 to get in, we sort of looked in thinking, this is all very nice, but there's not a lot here. But bear with it. There is a side room where there was a side passageway. There were plenty of other stalls there. And then we got the chance to go upstairs as well. And the hall was just beautiful inside. So many lovely photographic moments. But it was quite busy in there. So I couldn't take many good photographs of the building itself. And then we managed to get in quite easily at 10:15. It started at 10 o'clock. By the time we'd come out 1.5 hours later, they were queuing out the door to get in. So this was something that I bought before we even got into the hall. This was a gentleman, and his company was called Rust and Dust, but he has a longer tagline on that on Instagram, something like Creative Resources London. I'm not entirely sure, but I recognised him. Well, I recognised his products more likely. Do you follow Zeb and Jamie Ray? They're called Jamie Ray Vintage on YouTube, Instagram and Facebook. They're a couple who live in Utah and they have a reselling business, and they come over to England. They've come over to England this time of the year for the last 3 years, I think, and they may have been doing it much longer. But they meet up with Rusty and they buy lots of his ceramic jam jars. I should sort of preface that by saying he has an archaeology degree and he runs a multi-million-pound business, and he uses Victorian maps to find out where the waste tips were in the Victorian times. And he goes and I think he buys the tips. I'm not entirely sure how this worked, but he's certainly got a team of diggers who dig through the tips. And we were saying to him, it sounds like such an interesting job. And he says it is, but you've got to bear in mind, because it's going through a tip, it feels like on your body, because when you're getting hot and sweaty, ash mixed with razor blades was the term he used. And imagine that irritating your underarms or chafing between your legs. So we were put off by that a little bit. But he had loads and loads. In fact, Jan and Lisa, I think, bought these little ceramic pots I think they were going to use them for forcing hyacinth bulbs in, and they were cream coloured, and he was telling the history of them. Everyone had little scorings on it, and he said that was because they were made individually, so no two are alike. But they were originally, those particular ones we were looking at were made by Hartley's, and there was a tale then when the owner of Hartley's Jam went up to Stoke-on-Trent, and the pottery owner at Stoke-on-Trent thought he was going to put in another order, and something about he paid him to close the factory down. Don't quite understand that story, but if you were there at Penshurst and you chatted to Rusty, do let me know what that story was. He also had loads of blue milk of magnesia bottles of all sizes, tiny little Sainsbury's shrimp paste bottles, and he had them displayed with little china doll heads in them. But I bought this huge cotton reel, £5, and it's not got cotton on it. And this came from a trimming, a mill in, I'm guessing Yorkshire, Lancashire, isn't that where all our textile mills were originally? This isn't cotton on here. I don't know whether you can tell. It was the yarn that was used to make trimmings. So if you imagine you're doing some reupholstery or you're making yourself some fancy cushion covers and you want to put a trimming around the edge, I'm thinking the ones that have got the fringed loop, or perhaps a little tuft, I don't know what they're called now. What is it when you've got a little knot and then the edges coming out? A tassel. So it's that fabric. I don't know whether you can see, but it's got a bit of give in it. It looks like it's sort of tubular. So I bought this because who doesn't love a cotton reel? And I thought this would be quite nice for Christmas. Reds. There's definitely a colour theme going on with my buys. So do let me know once you've spotted what that colour theme is. So big cotton reel here. And then I found two smaller cotton reels. So I'm always on the lookout for the wooden cotton reels. And in fact, side story here, we then went on to Tunbridge Wells to look at the charity shops. And there was one charity shop which we hardly had any time to look in. It was a vintage shop, a vintage charity shop. So they curated everything. And it was in the Royal Victoria Arcade Shopping Centre, and it had a bowl full of cotton reels, and it said wooden cotton reels, 50p each. No, is that the right way around? I think it might have even been 20p each, and then the plastic cotton reels were 10p each. That would have been a really good value for money. Apart from when I looked through the bowl, there were only plastic ones there, and who wants plastic cotton reels? So I was quite pleased to find these. So a wooden cotton reel, this is coats, and again I'm going to be using this for crafting. Did you see the video I posted when I showed you the crafts that Jan, Lisa and I had been doing when we went away on our caravan holiday? So when we didn't have any thread left on our cotton reels, we wrapped fabric around them, and then we made them into Christmas decorations by threading ribbon through. So you can have a look back and find that video. It was only a few weeks ago. And then I think this was £1 as well. So this one had full of cotton as well. I'm not quite sure what, oh, that's coats as well. They're both coats. So what you'll find when you go to these vintage markets, sometimes everything is individually priced and sometimes things aren't. But I heard another lady asking about these, so I knew they were going to be £1. So I quite thought they were rather nice. What I'm going to do with these, I say we, because my friends and I have a regular craft night. We're in our Christmas craft season, and we did see lots of cotton reels that had the tiny bottle brush trees attached to the top. So we think we might do that. And so I could do that on here as well, and leave it plain. Or what we did see was people had actually put a single width of fabric around these, whereas when I showed you how I converted my bare cotton reel, I had wrapped ribbon around it, and I had a problem there when I came to gluing the last bit. It was just a little bit unsightly, but if you were clever with measuring this out with your rectangular shape of fabric, I think that would be slightly easier to do in terms of finishing off your fixings, so to speak. And then we found ribbon. So there was a beautiful florist as we first came in the door, and she had velvet ribbons for sale, not these ones, but hers were a little bit thinner. So I know that Jan bought a couple of lengths of those. And then as we moved round, it's the thing about the fairs. Do you buy as soon as you see it, or do you sort of have a recce of everything and then go back? I would say we had a case of primarily buying as we saw, because it was so busy, you couldn't guarantee that you would actually get back to the stall, or once you got back to the stall that what you wanted would be there. So this was a stall in the side room. This was a lovely, it had the staircase going out to the upper level, and the floor had huge checkerboard tiles. It was gorgeous. I did take a picture of the tiles and then deleted them because the photograph didn't come out very well. But these are both 3 meters of ribbon, and it cost £3, so it was £1 a metre. I thought that was good value for money. So I went with these sort of muted tones, a sort of mossy green and a burgundy red. And I don't know whether you watched my videos from setting up for Christmas last year, but I'd seen a picture in a magazine where they had a plain table. So, you have a table with a slab of wood on it. So the side of your table has got some depth to it. And I put double-sided tape onto my velvet ribbon that was a bit wider than these ribbons, and then peeled off the backing and then stuck it to the outside rim of my table. It was a really easy way of getting a bit of festivity into your table without overcrowding things. And the only problem I had was that it did start to fall off over the festive period. But when I say I did it on my Christmas table, it was my Christmas table, but I was in an Airbnb flat for Christmas. We'd rented a flat. So I was being a little bit careful with the amount of double-sided tape I was using. If I was doing it at home, I would double-sided tape the whole of the table, whereas I think I was trying to sort of get away with a bit at the beginning, a bit at the corners, so I probably didn't use enough, but I was slightly worried that I'd be left with a gluey residue. It might be difficult to get rid of, but as it happened, it was fairly easy to do. So those are on my list too. Now, I've got 4 pieces to show you, which make up 2 things. This, I cannot believe what I've got in here. You know when suddenly the stars align? So for some reason, I have seen, I think actually, it's probably, who wrote the book? Outside In. Do you remember Outside In, the book, which I did a book review on when I bought it on a trip to Rye to celebrate my birthday a few years ago? Sean Pritchard. I'm sure that in his book, he had lots of flowers arranged in these vases. So do you recognise that? If you've ever exhibited at your local horticultural show, whether that be daffodils in the spring or dahlias in the autumn, you will recognise these vases. And because I'd seen the vase used by Sean Pritchard, something just came up in my head, because on Friday evening I was Googling, green metal vases for flower show. And it's at that point I found out that they're called bikini vases, presumably because they're a 2-piece. So I immediately got onto one of my acquaintances who happens to be the current chair of our local horticultural society. And I said to her, do you have any of these? And are they metal? And have you got any spare ones? Perhaps I could buy one from you. And she messaged back immediately, said, we have got those. And she confirmed they were called bikini vases, but she said theirs are all plastic. So I'd had that conversation, that they'd come to mind, and lo and behold, I spot a bikini vase the very next day. This one cost me it cost me £8. And there was a taller one, perhaps in terms of proportion, I might have preferred the taller one, but that was £15. But I was conscious as well of how wide a bottom this is to the vase component. And I didn't want to limit the number of places I could put this. If the bottom, I'm not sure whether the bottom was any different size, but certainly I wasn't sure about the bulk of the top side. So it's got a large bottom piece because it needs to be sturdy enough to hold the water and the flowers that are going to be displayed. But I can't tell you how excited I was to find this. Now, I did quibble about the price, £8, but you have to have a word with yourself sometimes. If I'd been looking for this and I'd seen them online for £19, £19 each, and I'm not sure whether it was the small size or the bigger size, I just thought I'm being ridiculous, because if I get home and I decide, actually, I wish I'd bought it, I would have to have bought it at that increased price that I'd seen online. So I did. I bought this for £8 and I'm very pleased with it. I quite like the fact that it's got that horticultural society, that flower show look, because for years and years I did compete in the flower arranging classes of our local horticultural show, and I did enter the daffodil show once with our daffodils from home, and one of the old gentlemen there told me that I would have stood a better chance of winning with my daffodils if I clocked them. So a daffodil's got 6 petals sort of arranged in a 3/3, like a St David's star. But what you can do, the idea is though that you have the point at the top and the side pieces here and the point at the bottom. So it's a perfect star, not a lopsided one. And he said you have to clock your daffodils. So you very carefully hold the stem and then put your fingers around the trumpet of the daffodil and you just twist it round so that you end up with a perfectly point at the top and a point at the bottom. So there you are, an interesting fact. Now, the next piece, again, I think it's a good idea sometimes, it's always nice to go somewhere with company, because whoever you go with will have a slightly different idea of what they're looking for. You're not always after the same thing, but it means you've got an extra pair of eyes to look at all the stalls and you'll be naturally drawn to different things. Now, this here is from a lady, and I can't remember her business name. I think it might be something about sewing in Westerham, something like that. You'll have to check out my Instagram page at flowerstart with an underscore at the bottom to see if you can track her down, because I've recently followed her. We've had a bit of a conversation. But my friend Jan found this, and actually when I look through the Instagram feed of the lady who sold this, I can see this container and it's hidden because it was being used, and she had some little I don't know whether they were lavender bags or something, but little square bits of fabric that had been sewn, and I'm wondering whether they might have been lavender bags, but they all had a festive theme. And I'm guessing that perhaps Jan had lifted those up to look at, and then she discovered there was a lovely green bowl underneath. So you've been following me for a while. Do you know the maker's name? Extra points if you did. But can you see these little swirls inside? It's got a deep well. It would make an absolutely beautiful fruit bowl. In fact, I used to have something very similar to this that was green china. And I've sold that. Actually, I did sell it on my vintage store. And then I think actually I had to give a refund. I think it broke on the journey. Well, the memories. And a little footy thing. And I used it in my green ceramic one. I used it for flower arranging, in the olden days when I used to put flower foam in, but I've also used this for putting spring bulbs in indoors as well. So the first thing you need to do when you find something old, you don't know what it is. I don't know whether the camera is going to, yes, it can slightly pick that up. It says made in England, and then PATD, patent number. If I read the number out, can you write it down? I think it's 362737. So we could actually look that up on the internet to find out what this actually is. It's either, is it 362737. It's possible the 6 might be a 0, but I'm favouring towards 6 at the moment. So, have you guessed the maker? Does it look like swirls of cloud? I believe this is cloud glass made by the Davison Company. So it's probably made, it might well be 100 years old. Who knows? And nestled inside, you've guessed it, it's the flower frog to match. So I can see it's been used. It's got a little bit of chalk. So if I wanted to get rid of that, I would probably soak it in a solution of white vinegar. And again, I don't know whether the camera will pick it up, but it says made in England, patent. Oh gosh, I can see a 4, so it's 4 inches across. And is that 7830? Again, note that down, and then you too can have the fun of looking that up online. So I've got a matched pair. Originally, I think probably it may well have had a little pedestal stand as well. I don't know whether they all had pedestal stands, but certainly I have got one already that is a slightly shallower version of this, but mine is in the brown amber glass. I think I much prefer the green to the brown. So I'm thinking that before Christmas, I may well reopen my vintage store and put my existing Davison glass, my 3-part bowl, onto my vintage store, and one in, one out. And this was £18. So I decided that was, I have bought these before, and various prices. And I will say, if you love a flower frog, do have a look at my Facebook group, Flower Start World, because I was mainly taking pictures of flower frogs, and they varied in price from sort of £10 from this size, £10 to much smaller. Some of them with just the lid, the very flat lid ones. So it's always worthwhile. You'll always find something that's affordable, anywhere you go. £1 each for one of those, and so it's compared to £18 here. So you can always get a bargain. It just depends what you want. So have you ever arranged flowers in a bowl like this? I have got a video. I think I arranged dahlias a couple of years ago. So if I can find it, I'll link it in the description underneath this video. But if you find it first, let me know. So we also collected some bump. So if you're in Kent over the festive period, you might want to have a look at these. So this is Christmas at Chiddingstone Castle, and November the 29th. I should perhaps say it's 2025 in case you're watching this in the future. Gorgeous business cards. I think curious finds. I think this lady was at the top of the landing, and she had lots of vintage clothes. She had some beautiful Christmas decorations. It was the one store I didn't look at properly because there was people going upstairs, people going downstairs, and it was quite a congested space. But I do think Lisa and Jan had a good old look at that. I picked up this just because it's absolutely gorgeous. It's like an old-fashioned postage stamp. So this is another fair I've been to previously at the Tithe Barn in Lenham, which is just outside Maidstone in Kent. So it's this historic barn next to the village church, open November the 14th, 15th and 16th. It's an evening opening on the 14th, 5 till 7, but daytime on the Saturday and Sunday. And that is a gorgeous midwinter fair. In fact, perhaps I should have I picked up 2 of them. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? I might just stick that on my fridge. It looked lovely. And then I've picked up another leaflet which says the Dorset Brocante. Now, I did notice, because the girls and I, we always share our hauls when we get home. And I did notice that Lisa had picked up 2 of these cards, and she had them propped up on her mantelpiece. That look very lovely because it looks a little bit like a Christmas card. So if you're in the Dorset area, there's a winter brocante on the 14th and 15th of November at the Lammetry Gardens near Salisbury. That's a Friday and Saturday there. And then I also picked up the Country Brocante Winter Fair, and that's at Cowdray Park Polo Lawns in Midhurst. So that's over in Sussex with a Guildford postcode there. So absolutely loads and loads of beautiful things to see. So I wondered whether you might want to see me put my bowl to good use. So the only flowers I could find, can you see them in the background? I've been drying some hydrangea. So these ones, I'll show you the container. I think you've probably seen this container before. I've told you before that my friends and I do £2 birthday and Christmas presents, and this was it was a birthday present that Jan gave me. We don't think that actually the flower frog and the jug actually go together. It's just a lucky coincidence. And we did see the identical flower frog at the Penshurst Fair, and that was for sale for £10. So Jan did really well to get the 2 for £2. So I've had that for a little while. I'll bring that out in the autumn time so I can embrace those colours of autumn. And I've used it to dry some hydrangea heads. So these ones are, they're a little bit older than the others I'm going to show you. So you just put a little bit of water in the bottom of the container and let your flowers drink it up. And that's it. You don't replace the water when it goes, and they just dry out slowly over time. And I would say, normally I start thinking about drying my hydrangeas mid-September. We've got a family birthday mid-September, and I always think, birthday, that's time to dry my hydrangeas. But these ones here, I have cut just this last weekend. Can you see they've got a slightly more intense? So when you dry them, they do fade a little bit. But it's also got some browning here. So if you leave your hydrangeas for too long on the bush, they will go brown and they will just start to die and decay. So I would say probably we're in the first week of November. If you've got any hydrangeas in your garden that you want to dry out and keep, I would suggest you do it ASAP. So I've cut long stems here because it gives me a bit more flexibility, but then of course when I'm actually using them, I'm going to cut them short. So I've broken one of the florets, it's coming off. I'm just going to see if I can place that in my container so it doesn't look as if it's broken. So to have a tumbling bowl of hydrangea stems, and the only thing I need to be careful of here is it's got the bud part. So I just need to make sure that the stem and the bud can fit inside the container. And fortunately, my glass flower frog has got reasonably big holes. But if I'd wanted to put it in that little jug I've showed you just now, I'd have to just remove these pieces so that I had a smooth, uninterrupted passage into the flower frog. So this one's got a little bit of browning. I'm not going to bother about that because it's all part of nature's way, and I'm going to do this as a sort of just a mound. So probably something you could, if you were drying hydrangeas, just put them in a bowl, but you would have to sort of carefully balance them this way because I've got the flower frog. They are being locked in to those particular holes, so they're not going to fall apart as easily as if you just put them in a container and hope for the best. So I've managed here. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got, well, that's hardly a stem, is it? I've got 5, 6, 7. I've got 7.5 stems. So, and that's filled. It's filled about a third of the bowl. So if I've got 7, I'd need 7 there. So my flower heads are quite small, so that's 7. I need at least another 7. So I think probably to make a really full bowl, these are a bit short, but they're a bit short. But because they're dry, these ones they don't need to be in water. I could carefully balance them like that and just to fill it out a little bit. So I think I would probably need 20 heads to fill this container. So there we have it. I've mocked that up as how you could arrange flowers in your own vintage find. So I shall put that on the middle of my kitchen table, I think. And you guessed the theme, didn't you? Red and green for Christmas. And this is purely 100% coincidence. And I didn't realise it until I'd done my thrift haul photograph for my friends that I had definitely gone for a green and white theme. So I hope you enjoyed that video. Don't forget to join my Facebook group, Flower Start World. There's a link to that in the description underneath this video. And also give me a follow on Instagram. Lovely to talk to you, and I'll catch up with you next time.